Every single season, I am obliged to make a video on the pitchers that the Rays and the Dodgers have turned into very good relievers. Last year, it was Ryan Brazier and Robert Stevenson. This season, we have 3 more names. Let's start with everybody's favorite former White Sox, Michael Kopech. He's made 9 appearances since joining the Dodgers. He has allowed 2 base runners and struck out 13 batters. He's legitimately been one of the best relievers in baseball since the trade. With the White Sox, he wasn't that good. So what changed? First off, his fastball velocity is up 1 mile per hour comparing these 9 appearances to his prior 2 months with the White Sox. Could this be because he's not on a crappy team anymore? Absolutely. Could it be mechanics? Maybe. I usually look at things like release point, release side, and extension down the mound to determine if a guy could have changed something earlier in his kinetic chain that could be affecting one of those variables. For Kopech, many of those variables look the same. I'll be the first to admit I'm not that big of a mechanics guy, but to my eye, much of what he's doing from a throw standpoint looks pretty similar to his motion from mid-July with the White Sox. If nothing appears different in terms of mechanics, I move to usage. There's nothing dramatically different versus lefties, 80% fastball, and it grades out as one of the best in the sport, so why not throw it a lot? To righties, we do see some change in approach. He's down 10 percentage points in terms of fastball usage, throwing more of his hard cutter, and it's within that cutter where I think we see the central change. This is a pitch plot. It's showing the break of a given pitch. This way means more glove side movement. This way means more arm side movement. Above this line means the pitch is rising relative to the downward force gravity is imparting on the ball. Below this line means the pitch is dropping more than gravity. Look at Kopech's slider and cutter in his final 2 months with the White Sox. Now look at those 2 pitches in these 9 appearances with the Dodgers. What do you notice? The pitch is further down on the plot and the spread is tighter. There's less variance in the shape of the pitch. Now, I don't think this is a grip adjustment because his grip looks the same to me. I know this is tagged as 2 pitches, a slider and a cutter, but they're so similar to me I wonder whether it's just some natural release variation of the same pitch. So the pitch is dropping more and it's not because of a grip adjustment, so it looks to me like it's more of a location adjustment that's affecting the shape. Look at his cutter location to righties in those final 2 months with the White Sox and compare it to what we see with the Dodgers. It's down in the zone more, right? Very similar to what we saw on our pitch plot. So it's not so much of a shape tweak to me as it is a location and cue tweak. Something like bury the pitch or make sure you get it down instead of trying to strike the pitch. And in tandem with this novel cutter approach, putting it down in the zone and the resulting shape being more depthy, you could say, look at his fastball location. It's pretty sporadic, top of the zone, more so away from right-handed hitters with the White Sox, and now he's really letting it eat up and into righties. Instead of working this outer third tunnel here that the White Sox had him on, the Dodgers seem to be creating some separation between his locations to righties, and the result has been pure dominance. Perhaps that dominance is just because he's doing something different. Compare White Sox Kopech to Dodger Kopech, and you get subtle changes, especially from the perspective of a right-handed hitter. And I think those subtle changes allow for a runway of success in small samples. It gets to a larger point, though, that in season when the Dodgers acquire a player, most of their adjustments are small. They don't really do anything dramatic. Usage and location are relatively easy to play around with on a start-to-start basis or when a guy has to pitch every 3rd day. But going back to when Kopech was on the White Sox, I do think one of the complexities that I might be missing, maybe there's some mechanical adjustment here that it's allowing Kopech to execute his pitches better. I don't think I would have foreseen this dramatic of a location change, going heavy up in and down away. Or if you envision that, I don't necessarily know if Kopech would have been able to execute it. It seems like he was spraying the ball a lot. So my theory here is there's something I'm not noticing the Dodgers have done from a mechanic standpoint or a cue perspective that's allowing him to be a better pitcher. Perhaps it's that, perhaps it's something else, but they made him better, and that's unequivocally true. It's not just Kopech that the Dodgers have unlocked. The second best slider in baseball in terms of swinging strike rate since the beginning of July belongs to a pitcher who is in his 8th MLB organization as a pro. He's 31 years old and has a career 4.87 ERA. His name is Anthony Banda, a man who went the first 6 seasons of his career basically never throwing a breaking ball. The Dodgers went, yeah, that's the guy that we think can throw one of the best sliders in baseball. And the adjustment here is pretty clear. On the left, you're looking at Banda's slider grip from last season with the Nationals. And on the right, you're looking at his new grip with the Dodgers. They flipped him to a variation of a sweeper grip, which is a two-seam oriented slider that is thrown with the cue of a curveball most commonly. This grip is used to add lift and sweep to a pitch in ball flight due to how the seams of the baseball interact with the air around the ball on its way to the plate. Put another way, it's seam-shifted wake. The spike he's using is somewhat common as well, and because the cue on these pitches is normally to get to the front of the ball and let the seams of the baseball create the movement, the spike helps the pitcher achieve that by getting his wrist into a more favorable position for that to happen. The result from a shape perspective is a pitch that has 4 inches less induced vertical break, therefore it's dropping more, and it added 7 inches of horizontal movement or sweep. Fangraphs Stuff Plus has it going from a 95, which is a below average slider, to a 111, which is an above average slider. It has a 60% swing miss rate, a 28% swinging strike rate, and a 41% chase rate. That is insane. He's using the pitch nearly 45% of the time to lefties, and perhaps more surprising is that he's using it more than his changeup to righties, and the results have been as exceptional as they've been versus lefties. The Dodgers also got his velocity up, nearly 2 miles per hour on his fastball, which is something they are very, very good at doing. He's sitting with the highest average four-seam velocity of his career. They dropped his slot slightly as well, 1 to 2 inches here, and he's over towards the first base side of the rubber more compared to last season. Some of these adjustments, like moving over on the rubber, dropping his slot, and even potentially the grip and orientation he's using on his slider, all help to create an advantage from a visual standpoint, or his angles. I was talking to Bobby Miller earlier this season, and he told me that the Dodgers are pretty keen on putting Edgertronic cameras behind home plate, looking out at the pitcher, so that the pitcher has an understanding of what the hitter is seeing upon release. Miller told me this related to his fastball and slider, trying to refine those pitches. And that anecdote, among others, makes me wonder whether the Dodgers have a really good understanding of how hitter visuals work in making a pitch really good. And perhaps they supplement that back to something purely like Stuff Plus, which is often just driven by velocity. So I think that applies here, and it's helped Banda get to what is tracking to be the best season of his career, especially even dating back to like 2017, where he's not really been that good of a pitcher. The Dodgers, to some extent, have done it again with Banda. He's not one of the best relievers in baseball, but this slider is nasty. But enough with the Dodgers. Let's hit on a Rays arm. Edwin Uceta. He's actually been one of the best relievers in baseball since July 1st. 35 plus strikeouts, 28 innings with a sub-1 ERA. He only threw a few innings last season due to a torn meniscus, but even when he did throw 60 plus innings in 2022, they were not great innings. This season has been a revelation for him versus right-handed hitters. 3 changes jump out to me. Number 1, the Rays gave him a new cutter. This has a pretty standard shape. It's 89 miles per hour, 10 inches of vertical break with 2 inches of glove side movement or sweep. I believe he had this pitch in his repertoire in the past. I don't think it was this hard, but he really never threw it, and this season he's throwing it 30% of the time to right-handed hitters. It's mostly a non-2-strike pitch for him, and it's been insane from a batted ball perspective in the small sample we had. A lot of weak contact in the air. Number 2 is that they backed off his curveball. This was a downer pitch, kind of an interesting shape, but the release angle out of hand suggested he was popping the pitch above his fastball line to achieve the movement. Versus righties and lefties, this has been backed off pretty substantially, and he's now mixing in a new sweeper to right-handed hitters. Number 3 is that to make up for that usage drop on the curve, the Rays are really letting his changeup eat. To lefties, he's using his changeup nearly 50% of the time, and it has an 83% ground ball rate. To righties, he's up from 19% to 32%. I've talked about why changeups are good in past videos, and one of the most basic ways to think of things from a shape standpoint is that you want to kill vertical break relative to your fastball, but still throw it hard. We're looking for something like less than 9 miles per hour of velocity difference between a changeup and a fastball, with more than 10 inches of vertical break separation. Edwin Uceta's changeup is 6 miles per hour slower with 14 inches of vertical break separation. He's throwing the ideal changeup from a really low slot with a weird vertical sinker as his primary fastball, and he is cooking hitters. This is a complete identity change for Uceta. He's throwing 2 new pitches in the cutter and the sweeper. He's hammering his changeup usage, and he's really backed off that curveball he threw to either-handedness of hitter. The Rays have tolerance for guys like him who were injured coming off injury. You see this with Drew Rasmussen, Jeffrey Springs, multiple Tommy John guys, etc. And you have it with Uceta even when it's a non-arm injury. these guys with injuries are probably a bit cheaper, and the Rays are a cheap organization, but that doesn't really affect the point that they tend to make these guys into very good pitchers or extract a ton of value from them. We see this with the Dodgers as well. Brent Honeywell, they add him, throw a bunch of screwball, then release him multiple weeks later after having success with the organization. So you may be able to hammer these teams for breaking arms, so to speak, but at the same time, they're perennially in the top half in terms of results. They have tolerance for these types, and when I think you risk adjust, I would argue that they probably don't really run into more issues than other organizations. So that is the Rays and the Dodgers, who I hit on every year. I've made a ton of videos on them, but they're fascinating organizations. These are some guys they've changed this year, each with their own theme, right? Kopech is a guy with a couple adjustments that we're not entirely sure how they got him to unlock the potential he has, but he did have some of the best underlying stuff in baseball. Banda is a classic slider change. I know the Dodgers don't like sweepers, but they do like sweepers, I believe, in relievers at least more than starters. And then Uceta is a complete makeover guy from a team that's very injury risk tolerant. 3 guys who are fantastic and I imagine will be down the stretch. The Rays and the Dodgers have done it again. Thank you for watching.